humanitarian situation in Gaza. The loss of lives of innocent civilians' lives is an immense tragedy, and I would like to express solidarity with those innocent victims and their families. In DEVE, we closely follow the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and we would like to use today exchange of views to hear from our humanitarian partners as well as from Commission on the most pressing needs faced by the Gazan civilian population and on EU and international humanitarian response. As you know, the Commission announced an increase of its humanitarian assistance to over 100 billion euros for Gaza this year. We need, of course, to ensure that these funds are dispersed as soon as possible and reach those in need. In addition, the EU also launched a humanitarian air bridge operation to deliver in-kind assistance, including shelter, food, hygiene kits and medicines, among other life-saving aid. It is, however, clear that we need more donors alongside the European Union to step up the efforts to help the civilian population. In addition to ensuring sufficient levels of funding, we also need to secure safe, continued and unhindered humanitarian access as well as humanitarian pauses to enable delivery of humanitarian aid. Not only me, but I think most of us, of course, welcome the initial 4-day truce agreed between Israel and Hamas last week and its extension by 2 additional days. This temporary truce and the release of hostages allowed for a substantial increase in humanitarian aid delivery into and within Gaza. This is something that we can build on. Furthermore, it needs to be stressed that respect of international humanitarian law is crucial. The protection of civilians, in particular hospitals, its patients and medical supplies, is at the core of it. The use, of course, of hospitals and civilians as human shields by Hamas is, of course, also unacceptable. But without further delay, I now would like to turn to our guests and our speakers today. Before giving them the floor, I want to honor the incredible work of our humanitarian partners who work under extremely hard circumstances. And of course, I would also like to express my sympathy for the loss of lives for so many aid workers. But we start now. I give the floor to Ms. Marta Lorenzo, UNRWA Representative for Europe. 6 minutes, please.
Microphone for the speaker, please.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay. I am the representative of UNRWA, and as you know, this is the largest humanitarian actor in Gaza, and what we are seeing these days is an unprecedented crisis that has unfolded. This started, of course, with the nightmare of Hamas terror attacks on Israeli civilians and the taking of hostages. When I use the term unprecedented, it's not a rhetorical flourish. It's a stark reflection of the grim reality on the ground. I have been asked to provide you with an update, a humanitarian update, and I will refer to the current situation, to the response, and also how EU funding is being used to support us in this catastrophic situation. What is unprecedented is the loss of life. According to the government media office, almost 15,000 people have been killed. 73% are being children and women. It's also unprecedented, the toll of UNRWA colleagues, and I do thank you for your sympathy in these very difficult moments. 108 workers have lost their lives. This marks the highest number of UN personnel killed in such a short time frame, and tragically, the count can be higher. Around 1.8 million people, nearly 80% of the entire population, are now internally displaced. We prepare for hosting no more than 150,000 people in our emergency designated shelters, and we have now 1.1 million people seeking protection in 156 UNRWA installations. And when I was talking to my colleagues today, they told us there is no more space in shelters. In recent weeks, we have seen the systematic destruction of homes, hospitals, mosques, churches, bakeries. Our shelters have also not been spared. This is unprecedented. 69 UNRWA shelters, some of them schools, and some of them more than once, have been hit, including directly hit. Principles of international law, distinction, proportionality, and precaution have been challenged. And I think it has also been unprecedented, the strict siege on Gaza, on restrictions of humanitarian aid, including when it comes to water and food. UNRWA Commissioner General entered Gaza twice since the start of the conflict, and during his last visit, he managed to visit the Khan Yunis training center. This institution was before providing hope for many unemployed youth in Gaza. It now shelters 35,000 people. And in the Commissioner General's own words, it resembles an overcrowded prison with substandard living conditions threatening public health, because we are seeing sewage on the streets. Communicable diseases like skin diseases and diarrhea have soared, reaching 45 times the pre-war levels in some areas. Our schools, as I said, have turned into shelters designed for 1,500 people, hosting now 4 times more than the intended capacity. There are now 3,000 to 5,000 UNRWA staff who, despite being displaced themselves, go to work to serve the community, risking their own lives. UNRWA has continued to deliver healthcare at shelters through 126 medical teams. We have received a total of 600,000 patients treated by our staff since the 7th of October. This would not have been possible without your support. Gaza is now currently home to an estimated 50,000 pregnant women, with over 180 giving birth daily. Midwives, UNRWA midwives, have been essential in delivering care to postnatal and high-risk pregnant women. We also welcome the news of a 4-day pause that the parties agreed to and its 2 days extension. It has provided relief to civilian population. We have witnessed that in this period of time, just in the last 72 hours, 20,000 more people crossed down from the north to the south. What we have been trying to do is to access the north, and for the first time, UNRWA and humanitarian partners were able to distribute ready-to-eat food to shelters in Jabalia camp, as well as tents and blankets and bottled water in other sites. Our colleagues in the north did not stop working all this time, including providing health services and service and shelters. This is at a time in which we had lost communication with them. Cooking gas has entered Gaza for the first time, but in very small quantities. Cooking gas is essential. UNRWA is distributing wheat flour, but if people are not able to then produce bread because they don't have gas or electricity, wheat alone would not make it. UNRWA stands ready to receive more trucks, including fuel, but what we need is more humanitarian access. We need more crossing points. We reiterate our call for a lasting humanitarian ceasefire, unimpeded and sustained humanitarian access, the lifting of the siege on Gaza, and scale-up assistance commensurate to the needs of people. Let me now express my profound gratitude for the long-standing support of the EU and particular leadership and support of ECHO to respond to this crisis. Our thanks also goes to this Parliament for its support and its calls for increased funding to UNRWA's core budget. Without the core budget, we will not be able to deliver on the humanitarian crisis. We consistently warn of the dangers of despair and distress in Palestinian communities, emphasizing the urgency of working for a political solution. Unfortunately, our appeals went unanswered, leaving UNRWA weakened. This is why your commitment to UNRWA is so important and is making a real difference. Your commitment saves lives and support much more than that. It supports stability in the region. Recognizing the imperative for change, a renewed commitment to actively pursue a political solution is the only viable path to shield future generations from the recent atrocities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lorenzo. I will now pass the floor to Ms. Magnine Nikolai, who is MSF Director General. You have 6 minutes as well.
Thank you. Estimated members of the European Parliament, I'm grateful for the invitation and honoured to speak at this committee, asking you to do everything within your power to ensure an immediate and sustained ceasefire in Gaza and use your political role to push the Israeli government to stop the deadly attacks on Palestinian civilians, to lift the siege and allow crucial humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. Though a 6-day truce is the first sign of humanity, after weeks of relentless violence, few days are nearly not enough to organize the delivery of sufficient aid to meet the immeasurable needs. We fear it's just a matter of days before the mass killings of Palestinians starts again. Without a swift and prolonged ceasefire, what will be left of Gaza and its people? My colleagues and I, like so many people in the world, were aggrieved and shocked by Hamas' attack to Israeli civilians. Now, after 7 weeks, northern Gaza is being erased from the map. The health system has collapsed. According to the Gaza health authorities, more than 14,000 people are dead, half of which are children, tens of thousands are injured. At least 1.7 million people have been displaced, according to the United Nations, forcibly ordered to move south, a region also being bombed. Nowhere is safe, not even hospitals. MSF sent an international emergency team to Gaza to support a series of hospitals around Khan Yunis. Regrettably, their activities have been severely limited due to the scale of casualties, destruction of infrastructure, lack of essential supplies including fuel, and the ongoing insecurity. We want and ought to be able to do so much more. We've seen a blatant and total disregard of the protection of Gaza's hospitals. The World Health Organization has documented 178 attacks on healthcare. Medical staff, including the MSF staff, are utterly exhausted and beyond despair. They've had to amputate limbs from children suffering from severe burns without anesthesia or sterilized surgical tools. People are dying of pain. Due to the forcible evacuations by Israeli soldiers, some doctors, against medical ethics, have had to leave patients behind and faced an unimaginable choice, their lives or those of their patients. We are watching as hospitals are being actively targeted and turned into morgues. They are being striked, shot at, encircled and raided, killing patients and medical staff, resulting in an evident violation of the 2286 UN Security Council resolution calling for the respect and protection of humanitarians, medical personnel, medical transports and medical facilities during conflict. 3 of our MSF staff have been killed. Many more have lost family members and numerous colleagues have been injured. On November 21st, 2 MSF doctors, together with a 3rd doctor, were killed by a strike in Al-Auda hospital. The day before, an MSF clinic in Gaza came under fire, leaving the clinic damaged and several MSF-branded cars destroyed. On November 18th, our convoy, evacuating more than 130 staff with their families, was attacked, killing one family member and later resulting in the death of another. How is it possible that instead of being a sanctuary of humanity, hospitals have become the theatres of war? There is no comprehensible justification for such atrocious acts. Since 2007, Gaza is under a blockade. Now it's under arbitrary detention. The Israeli government enforced a complete siege on Gaza, banning the entry of water, food, fuel and medical supplies for 2.3 civilians trapped in the enclave. Subjecting an entire population to collective punishment is a war crime as per international humanitarian law. Despite Israel's claims it's an all-out assault not being waged just on Hamas, it's being waged on all of Gaza and its people at all cost. Even wars have rules. We are witnessing the fundamental principle of humanity being openly disgraced, with the people of Gaza being handed a death sentence. The first value of which the European Union was founded is the inviolability of human dignity, which must be respected, protected, and constitutes the real basis of fundamental rights. As members of the European Parliament, you should protect and promote these values with concrete actions. Are you doing whatever is in your power to respect and protect the dignity of Palestinian people trapped inside Gaza? I'm imploring you not to turn a blind eye on thousands of civilians and use your political role to adopt any measure to grant an immediate ceasefire, to complete lifting of the siege, unhindered humanitarian access, and the protection of health facilities. The indiscriminate and relentless attacks must stop now. The forcible replacements must stop now. The assaults on hospitals and medical staff must stop now. The siege and the restrictions on aid must stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nikolai. I will now pass the floor to Mr. Giovano di Girolamo, who is head of unit on Middle East at DJ ECHO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Of course, everyone has listened to this quite tragic description of the situation. And if we can say that the humanitarian truce or pause has given some bright of hope of a trend, we must know that before this happened, we were seriously concerned that Gaza could be completely on the brink, not only for the almost 50,000 people killed, of which 6,000 children and 4,000 women, but also because after 45 of siege and intense bombing, with so many people displaced, with so many facility, water treatment facility, drains, the health situation as had been described, we were afraid that we were really on the brink of an exponential growth of death. Because, of course, after 45 days, resilience of people start really slowly collapsing. So this pause certainly provides some hope, but, of course, we need much more extended pause. We need enforcement of international humanitarian law. We need at least 500 trucks a day coming into Gaza. We need more entry point. We need a better scanning mechanism. We need a better movement of humanitarian operator and items within Gaza. This is essential because, of course, if after the truce everything starts like before, we will be again soon in the same situation. So DG ECHO, of course, and the European Commission, we mobilize quickly. We try to mobilize all our partners. From one side, of course, we launch our air bridge, but then we also we use the partners which were on the ground, like UNRWA, for example, to provide additional assistance, to do whatever they can. But of course, we also know that humanitarian people are at risk. More than 100 UNRWA staff have been killed. So the whole situation also requires deconflicting, require extensive somehow change in the way in which the people can move within Gaza now. It's, the quadruplication of humanitarian assistance seems an enormous step done by us, and actually it is in the current budgetary situation. But at the same time, we have to understand that the needs we could find in Gaza when the situation will be more conducive to proper distribution of aid could be much worse. Because, of course, when you have the displacement of almost to 1,500,000 to 2 million people, and then when you have such massive destruction of infrastructure, the situation will be facing in the coming days, even if the situation in terms of humanitarian pause remain better, will also be very difficult. So I also want to thank not only the Parliament for the interest, but also the Member States, which not only have supported us in new allocation of funds, but also they've launched a number of bilateral actions, which also could allow to have, as Europe, as Team Europe, a massive manoeuvre which should allow us to have a significant impact on the ground. But of course, every time we are in close contact with all the partners, even if they work for us or not, to get more information and more somehow update knowledge of the situation on the ground. But I think that we have seen something completely different, which since a long time, a crisis of this kind was not felt in this kind of proportion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will soon open up the floor for the political groups. But I would firstly like to give the floor to our standing rapporteur on humanitarian aid, Mr. Carlos Serrano. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your testimony, which gives substance and confirms the horrors that we read in the press and see on TV. These hostilities are causing a number of deaths and suffering that shock the world and hurt our hearts. In the European Parliament, we have given a voice to people who suffer, and we demand the full application of the primacy of international humanitarian law. We did it in the DEVE committee and in the plenary, and we do it again here today. Thank you, President. You approved a strategy for humanitarian aid that proposes more resources and methodologies for more effective implementation. But it's true, and implementation needs to be done right now. We are on day 52 of this war, with more than 6,000 dead, most of them human and children. The Gaza Strip is under heavy fire, and around 80% of its inhabitants are currently displaced, escaping for a brutal attack that destroys everything and everyone. More than 100 UN agents have been killed since the beginning of the war, and more than 60 journalists have lost their lives in the territory. Never in its history has the United Nations lost so many agents on the ground in such a short time. It is essential to ensure a platform for dialogue between Israel and Hamas to achieve a definitive humanitarian ceasefire that allows humanitarian aid to effectively enter in Gaza, guaranteeing the survival and lives of civilians, and at the same time the safety of humanitarian actors. The siege and attack on Gaza constitute a clear and unacceptable violation of international humanitarian law. A solution for a sustainable future for the region is urgently needed, which must involve the existence of two states, which Israel and Palestine living side by side. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And we will continue now with the political groups and start with EPP, Janina Ochojska.
Thank you very much. I will speak in Polish. Muszę powiedzieć, że...
Thank you very much. I would like to say that the images from the Gaza Strip really move me, and I've seen quite a lot of dreadful images about 10 years ago with Polish humanitarian aid. Well, we've been helping out, providing assistance in different conflicts. I have worked in the Gaza Strip and West Bank, but what I've seen recently I've never seen before. And if you take a look at the figures, we've heard the figures in the statistics being given, and we have to think how we can help these people survive through these very difficult times. How can we help and support the organizations that are actually on the ground at the moment. To the lady representing UNRWA, I'd like to know just how many other organizations who have resources to help are they there in Gaza? What is the possibility to actually get more humanitarian aid there? And what's going to happen in 2 days' time? Because the pause has been extended for 2 days. So what happens after 2 days? Is there going to be more bombing? Are more people going to die? And are we going to see these even more tragic stories like the hospital being bombed, everything we've heard from the MSF, which is an example of how hospitals are being attacked? How can we support and help these people? And how can we get this aid to them? We had started to develop a plan, but for a time of stability for Gaza Strip, but also for Israel, because, of course, these situations are linked. Thank you.
Thank you, Janina. S&D, Monica, you would like to take the floor?
Gracias, Presidente en función.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to repeat and also support what the rapporteur has said, Mr. Serrano, when it comes to the humanitarian situation. And the question I have for the Commission, ECHO in particular, we know that the Commissioner at the last plenary in Strasbourg was saying that obviously we're looking for new corridors, new entry points for humanitarian aid. So I'd just like to know, what lines are you working on? We are the principal donor together with the Palestinian Authority. So obviously we have to bring our weight to bear in these negotiations and talks and see whether the pause can be extended. And I think the political forces here in the Parliament must try and do that, as I said, as one of the main donors to Palestine. So thank you very much. And obviously we have our support. We can give you our support. We can't just stick to rhetorics and talk. We have to really do something about the dreadful situation that the whole Palestine is going through. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And for the Renew Group, Barry Andrews.
Just to thank the presenters and the Commission for their testimony this evening. I had shared with the other MEPs just continuing horror at what we're observing. This short pause is really just not good enough, and we need to see an extension. The number of deaths has reached a level that is so far departed from any proportionality as to really raise the question of whether or not we can stand by to watch this happen day by day if it resumes in the next few days. I want to just ask a practical question about the Rafah crossing. As far as I understand it, and been briefed by UNRWA before, is that Rafah isn't necessarily a freight crossing in normal circumstances. There were 5 or 6 other crossings between Israel and Gaza, and when we talk about 500 trucks that are needed, that they habitually crossed all of these crossings before October the 7th, and now trying to squeeze them into one crossing where there is where they don't have the facilities. Perhaps you could just elaborate on why Rafah, even if the government of Israel were allowing humanitarian aid to cross, even if that was the case, that it would not be possible to reach the level of humanitarian aid that's required. Maybe the Commission could tell us a little bit about the Cyprus corridor, the maritime corridor that we've heard about. Are you putting in sufficient effort to try to make that happen? There's been some talk, but no action, frankly, and we need to see that addressed. And finally, I would like to ask UNRWA and MSF to comment on the efforts that the government of Egypt are making to relieve the pressure on the population of Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. And for the Greens, Ms. Rose.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to those who have spoken and given us a state of play. Some MEPs have spoken on the humanitarian aid, which is in course, and we've got this extension of 2 days, which is very good news, of the aid, of the ceasefire, rather. And you have spoken about the fact that the pause should evolve into a sustainable, permanent peace. We have various stakeholders who've come and spoken about the fact that the international law is not being respected in this regard, and thousands of children are suffering under the bombs. You gave a 63% percentage. We have to protect those also who are working in there and providing humanitarian assistance. It's not enough. We know that. We see that bakeries, places where they could have access to food and also to fuel is just inexistent. This is collective punishment, and it seems to be going on and on. So I have some questions about the humanitarian aid, which colleagues have not yet brought up. The possibility, for example, of these corridors. And via Cyprus, for example, a maritime corridor, apparently that will be opened up. Is the European Commission going to take into consideration that the Cyprus route would take place? Is the European Union really applying pressure to open up these other points of entry? And as we've heard from the United Nations, why have these issues not yet been dealt with in the European Union in regard to this passage of aid? Is the European Union also monitoring the situation in the West Bank and the violence which is breaking out there? Thank you.
Thank you. I see no one from ECR and from ID, but I have from the left, next in the round is Miguel Uban Crespo, please, for 2 minutes.
Gracias. Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It's true that if you look at the dreadful humanitarian situation in Gaza, it's not the result of a natural disaster, it's the result of the collective punishment that's being meted out on the Palestinian population, a collective punishment which is breaking any kind of international humanitarian law, and thanks to the impunity granted by the United States and European Union on Israel. And it's a disaster which is the result of an infrahuman situation where there's no water, energy or medical supplies going into the Gaza Strip. And this is a result of bombs that have killed more children than all the wars last year. So we have a humanitarian disaster where we've seen that journalists and humanitarian aid workers are being killed. And it's a disaster that is the result of attacks on hospitals and schools, a humanitarian disaster, which is looks very much like ethnic cleansing. And this is not going to end with the supply of humanitarian aid. What do we need? We need to use all the mechanisms and tools under international humanitarian law to bring Israel to halt this attack and the decades of occupation and apartheid on Palestine. If the European Union really wants to put an end to the situation in Gaza, then all they have to do is implement and apply international law, which includes an embargo on arms supplies, suspend the preferential agreement with Israel until the systematic violations of human rights have come to an end, and an end also to the occupation of Palestinian territory. Otherwise, you're just putting a Band-Aid on somebody throwing bombs at you. So I have three questions, and obviously thank you to all the wonderful work that you do. How can you explain the high number of UNRWA workers that have been killed, assassinated. Has this happened in other conflicts, or is it only happening here? Because there are different rapporteurs from United Nations, Pedro Arrojo, who have now said that there is the possibility that genocide is being perpetrated in Gaza Strip, which is a harsh word. So I'd like to know what you think of that. And thirdly, when it comes to your own opinion and international law, what about the military strategy of cutting off supplies, energy, humanitarian aid to over 2.5 million people? What can you call that under international law?
Thank you. We have no one for the non-inscribed, but we have two more members for a minute to intervene before we come back to our interlocutors. So, Soraya Ramos for a minute, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I would also like to thank the representatives of UNRWA, Médecins Sans Frontières, and I would also like to, apologize almost because we belong to an international organization, the European Union, and I would like to apologize for the fact that we have not been able to act energetically enough to be able to respect international law, because we've seen that a lot of aid workers have been killed. And they went into this work, they didn't know before they did so that they were going to have to pay with their lives for helping people in these conflicts. I do have a couple of questions. One that comes to the crossing points, the corridors for humanitarian aid. The Commission has said, yes, increase humanitarian aid fourfold, but if the aid can't get in, there is the Shalom passing between Israel and Gaza Strip. That is the one that accounted for about 60% of freight and trade going through before this dreadful carnage. Is there any kind of negotiation with Israel for that particular passing point to be opened? And what is how far have we got with a possible agreement with Cyprus, which would allow thousands of tons of aid being able to get through, even though we know that the port facilities in Gaza are very small scale and have been bombed? So I would just like to know what your vision is of that particular perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya. And for a brief addition, Monica Gonzalez.
Gracias, Presidente.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor again. Another question which I feel is important, given that the Israeli government, in the middle of unprecedented humanitarian situation, has bombed DG ECHO installations in the West Bank, how is the Commission going to react? Because, of course, this is endangering thousands of lives. So that's a question to the Commission. But then, of course, we know that your aid workers are losing their lives as well. So how is this, because we've got the situation in the West Bank as well, and how is that affecting the work that your organizations are doing there?
Thank you. We will now go back to the three speakers we had before, and we are very good in time management, so we can stick to the, even it's just 5 minutes, but hopefully you can fill these 5 minutes with a lot of answers to the questions. And we start with Mrs. Lorenzo from UNRWA. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will try to answer as many questions as I can. I think we heard from the EPP how what other organizations are doing in Gaza. Of course, we don't work in isolation, but it is very clear that UNRWA is by far the largest humanitarian actor. First, because we have been there for 75 years. Second, because we have 13,000 employees in Gaza, so this is not a small number. But we work under the coordination of the humanitarian country team, where you have UN agencies and other NGOs, and of course we work in coordination, in direct coordination with ECHO on very operational and strategic issues. So coordination is happening, and there are other organizations that are on the ground. But we should not forget that before the Gaza war started, it was UNRWA that was providing food aid assistance, in-kind assistance to 1.2 million people. So we are still the largest agency, but of course WFP, UNICEF, UN Women, UNFPA are other important actors. What can be done what after 2 days is very difficult to predict. Our ask is that we don't go back to where we were, because this is horror. and how much horror a civilian population can stand when we know that we don't have any more space in our shelters. In fact, the Commissioner General described it as prisons because we had to lock them because there is no much more space for anybody else. So we don't want to go back to a situation where there is no food, when there is no water, when we have to beg for fuel. So scale up humanitarian assistance is what we need, and this takes me to what other options are available on the table. Obviously, the Rafah crossing point is not the solution. This place was not meant to be a crossing point for commodities. We need more crossing points. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel because Kerem Shalom was there in the first place. And this is the one place that has a scanning capacity to allow scale-up humanitarian assistance. So our call is to use what was existing before the war started because this is available and this is simple. Another simple solution is the restoration of basic supplies, including electricity and water, for which I have always repeated, we do not need trucks. We need a long-standing humanitarian ceasefire that allows us to conduct basic repairs of the water network so that we are able to restore water supplies. And as I said, this does not need trucks. So that needs lifting the siege. On Egypt, we have found a very good partner, but I am not aware of the details of the negotiations with Egypt, so perhaps others can come in. But in terms of relieving the pressure, I think we have found a very good partner when it comes to the coordination of humanitarian assistance. How is it possible that there were so many UN workers killed in this conflict? Because they were not killed while doing their humanitarian work. They were killed in their homes. They were killed in their homes with their entire families. It is very difficult to protect humanitarian workers when there is no place to flee in Gaza. And many people chose to stay in their homes, and they were killed in their homes. I will leave to the Commission the issue of the maritime corridor. Yes, I think on the comment made by the left, Uban, you said that humanitarian assistance is not the solution. No, humanitarian assistance, it's only helping us mitigate the suffering of civilians in Gaza, but it is not the solution. The solution is a long-standing ceasefire. The solution is not to go back to where we were when the war started with 16 years of blockade and with no hope for Palestinian civilians and with distrust and fear by the Israeli population. So there needs to be much more than that. And it's only just a lasting political solution that is going to bring back peace in the region. I think the last question from Monica was on how is the current situation in the West Bank affecting our operations. Well, they are disrupted. That's the short answer. We have seen a total closure of the West Bank, restrictions of movement, and that makes it very, very difficult for our operations to continue. Operations mean the school system to continue. Obviously, when you have teachers and school children needing to cross checkpoints, this is not possible in the current situation. And yes, we keep our facilities open, but this does not mean that life is normal in the West Bank. We have seen raids in refugee camps, we have seen detentions, we have seen 45 children being killed, children being detained, and I was speaking today in an event organized by a parliament member here on detention of children. This is what is happening right now in the West Bank and makes it very, very difficult for people to have a normal life. I stop there. 6 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for these answers, and we continue directly with Ms. Nikolai, please.
Thank you. Yeah, some of the questions were really for negotiations, I think, for the UN or the Commission. So I'll take the points that I can address. So how can we help? The first intervention from the lady. How can we help? Well, that's what I said. As members of parliament, you can help with your political voice to insist on a prolonged, a true, immediate, sustained ceasefire. And that ceasefire is important for also humanitarian aid, because otherwise we will not be able to scale up to address the needs. And that goes together with lifting the siege. So as parliamentarians, you can bring that up and impose those ceasefires together with other parts in the world. Yes, I agree with you. A short pause, you were saying, is not enough. Completely agreed. That's why we asked for a sustained ceasefire. On the comment on Egypt, it's a complex situation as Rafah border, as you were saying. It's small. It was not meant for freight. So you have Kerem Shalom, but you have others. So we agree with some of the others to open more crossings, but lifting the siege overall is very important. For us, it's also complex who exactly holds which key, because the negotiations are difficult. So the United Nations have a voice in this, the Egyptian Red Crescent. We have been able to pass 24 metric tons of aid, this last already before this truce. And the last days we've brought in a bit, including just food for our own staff, because they don't have enough, let alone that you can bring in your medical supplies and the very needed fuel. I want to highlight that fuel is crucial for the running of hospitals, for running water pumps, sewage systems and all that, and that's all impacting public health, as we know. So with Egypt, we're also looking into now caring for wounded. They have agreed to have a surgical team in to work close to that Rafah crossing. So these are negotiations ongoing. So I'm not saying here that it's being blocked. The other points, so UNRWA staff called. Our doctors were killed, were on duty. I want to be very clear there. So the attack on Al-Auda hospital, there were 3 doctors standing behind the window. Something, I cannot classify exactly what kind of arm it was, entered the building and killed the 3 doctors in one go. And 2 of them were MSF doctors. What is attributing to the military strategy? Is it amounting to, you mentioned war crimes, etc. I think you managed yourself, collective punishment of people. I've mentioned it, forceful displacement. And then I think what I highlighted as well is the attack on medical mission. There is a UN resolution 2286. After our attack on Kunduz, we've been pleading very strongly that the UN Security Council would take that up again to preserve the medical mission by the personnel, the patients, the infrastructure that should not be under attack. And I think, again, as parliamentarians, you can say something about it. Last thing I wanted to say on West Bank, I didn't address it, absolutely is a catastrophic situation as well. Our teams are working in Jenin, in the hospital. We've had over the last few weeks several times that the entry to the hospital has been blocked. Ambulances have been blocked entrance to the hospital, which is absolutely not acceptable. So we see a lot of incursions in the Jenin camp. So the teams of MSF are working in Jenin in the hospital, trying to help as well in the camp to bring help there, first aid, as well as in Nablus and Hebron and other places in the West Bank. Situation is also very complicated.
Also to you, thank you very much, Ms. Nikolai. And we also have, again, Mr. Di Girolamo. Please take the floor.
Yes, thank you. So just to go in order, trying to reply to all your concern. Of course, we are looking in a way to be fast in delivering aid. So the first reason why there was this quadruplication of the aid is essentially to be ready. So it's thanks to that we are we have been able to provide additional financial resources to the partners like UNRWA, WFP, WHO, Red Cross, UNICEF, Norwegian Refugee Council, etc., who can, within the existing tools they have on the ground, they have been able to deliver more aid. And actually, when the humanitarian pause was established, we had the possibility to quickly step up the aid. However, of course, it's very much insufficient, it's clear, and the present system is very complex. So, to give you an idea, items arrive in El Arish, in the Sinai Peninsula on the Mediterranean coast. They are inspected there. Then they go back to Rafah, where there's a second inspection. When they have been cleared and sealed, they go down to Nitzana, which is down the border between Israel and Egypt. In Nitzana, they are inspected again, sealed, and then sent back to Rafah. Rafah, of course, was previously was used for movement of people more than massive movement of goods. So it has been adapted, somehow repaired, and then once in Gaza they go to large facility, it can be facility of the UN, the large Qatari, so-called Qatari depot, and there are a number of ways by which, with great bravery, UN and others try to convey the aid within Gaza. So there is definitely we need more entry point. Before there were but there were some entry points along the Israeli-Gaza border. We, of course, passed the message to Israeli that it's important also to increase. For the time being, their reply is no. Just to be frank, so it's go beyond what humanitarian branch or the European Commission can do. But, of course, we continue our advocacy, explaining and using the argument that, of course, at a certain moment it becomes exponential and becomes impossible to control for anyone when people, if there's an epidemic or whatever, the number of deaths could be to go up much bigger than it is now. So then, of course, other option, okay, maritime corridor. Of course, maritime corridor also deserve, and we are putting a lot of attention in this, and certainly Cyprus could be a very close operational basis with all the facility, etc., very close to the Middle Eastern region. However, you need some form of deconflicting. You cannot send ships very close to Gaza to be then in the middle of a fight. The ships are very vulnerable when they are close to the coast. By the way, there is a problem also of deep water port. So in Gaza, port facilities are not adequate. So you need some form of transshipment, which is also complex. Then, of course, also you can, in the meantime, send more massive aid to El Arish by boat. That's a possibility. So all this is studied. There are technical issues, but at the core of it, of course, you need some form of pauses to operate properly. And this is not only for entering Gaza, but also for distributing within Gaza. Because, of course, when you have such an intense bombing and such a high volume of the destructive power unchained on civilian infrastructure, you need a certain moment to stop to adjust the possibility of moving within the Gaza Strip. But they're doing it. So people are risking their life to provide assistance. They are in Gaza, and they continue to do that. Then there was another question concerning, I think, West Bank. Yes, of course, we monitor West Bank through our Jerusalem office and through our partners. We are very active in the West Bank. We have a number of specialized NGOs in legal protection, in trying to block, when possible, eviction and demolition, etc. However, in West Bank, what we saw after the 7th of October is an exponential growth of that. There are, since then, 230 Palestinian kills and almost 3,000 seriously injured. So this is something unprecedented. Of course, in the West Bank, there was a growing, during last year, increase of violence, vigilante violence against villages, etc. But sometimes it's intervention by the army. But however, this is something, the volume now is much more serious. So, of course, there is a concern for the West Bank, and we hope, of course, we advocate for restraint. This is also something that is done, but of course staying within our humanitarian role. Then other parts of the Commission or the European External Action Service or other have, of course, the possibility to go more political in this sense. So this is also something important. And I don't remember now if there was a fourth question, but I'm not sure to keep all of them. But if there is anything else, I think, in which the Commission was addressed, apart this. Sorry?
Well, if it is very brief, you can remind the colleague. Otherwise, you have to chit chat just after the meeting.
No, como usted prefiera, presidente.
No, as I was saying, it was a question on Cisjordan, the left bank. Has the Commission prepared a reply against the attack that were in the West Bank?
Bueno, a esta altura, obviamente.
Well,
we can continue to our advocacy, of course. We continue to provide funds for protection in the West Bank. And even there, of course, is a political discussion. It goes to a certain extent beyond humanitarian aid. So in this moment, I'm not really in the position of telling we are going to do this and that, because these other branches of the European institution will be operating on that. But certainly we provide data, we provide information, we know what's happening on the ground, we monitor on a daily basis what's happened there, and we, in the limit, of course, of our mandate, we tell, of course, our Israeli counterpart that there is a serious problem there. And I understand that, of course, some part of the Israeli society is aware of it, of the risk, and so it's because also a situation who can go easily out of hand. And concerning Jordan in particular, so Jordan is also active, and there too, of course, there is a conference in Amman on the 30th of November in which coordination for aid to Gaza will be discussed.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Fortunately, the interpreters gave us a couple of extra minutes, so thank you for that, so that we can conclude, also because we have Mr. Janecek in the room from the EAS. He's the Deputy Head of Middle East Division, and is of course would be delighted to also have your information. If you can briefly comment within 2 minutes also on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. Let me start by commending the work of our partners, in particular UNRWA, in dealing with the tremendous challenges on the ground. I also would like to join words of sympathy that have been also said here by many regarding the loss of life of UNRWA members. There are over 100 colleagues that have died during the tragic events that we have seen in the past weeks. On our side, let me say perhaps a word. I could recall the EU position, which of course was discussed at the highest level by EU leaders, that has been consolidated in the October European Council conclusions. That of course is firstly to emphasize Israel's right to defend itself in the face of the brutal and indiscriminate terrorist attacks, but also to emphasize the need to respect international law and international humanitarian law. EU leaders were also very clear on the utmost importance to ensure the protection of civilians at all times and everywhere. And of course, they have also expressed particularly grave concerns for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza and have called for continued and rapid and safe, unhindered humanitarian access to reach those in need. Of course, as has been said here, it's also very important for us to think about the long term, and EU leaders have also been very clear about that. The EU position has translated in very concrete work strands for all the institutions. The High Representative and Vice President Borrell has been personally extremely engaged on this and has followed on the work strands also with the help of the foreign ministers in the Foreign Affairs Council. He has recently come back from the region, as you know, because he debriefed the European Parliament a couple of days ago. He visited Israel, Palestine, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, as well as Jordan, and he discussed these issues with regional leaders, how to improve the humanitarian situation, but also how to work on the long term. Yesterday, he co-chaired the Union for the Mediterranean meeting with the Jordanian counterpart, where they discussed exactly the same issue. The whole meeting was, in fact, focused on the situation in the Middle East. Perhaps briefly on the FAC work strands that I mentioned, because, of course, humanitarian situation is one of the three issues that the focus is particularly concentrated on. My colleague from the Commission has already mentioned the EU work on this work strand. The High Representative was very clear from the beginning in his call and in his support to the call by the UN Secretary General Guterres. We have also been very clear in our call to support the implementation of the UN Security Council resolution that was adopted a couple of days ago in New York. And of course now we have, like others, welcomed the 4-day pause with the release of the hostages, and of course very much welcome the extension and hope for more more extension, and of course continued efforts to release all the hostages. The second work strand perhaps is worth mentioning as well, because of course foreign ministers are very much focused on making sure that the situation doesn't spread in the region, that there is no spillover. That includes the West Bank. That was also a particular question by a couple of parliamentarians, and my colleague from the Commission has already mentioned the situation in the West Bank is very much followed also by the High Representative himself, and of course the whole External Action Service. The High Representative has discussed this in quite detail also in Israel with the counterparts, and raised these issues personally with the interlocutors. And third, perhaps last, is really for us the need to think about the long term. It's very hard because, of course, everybody's focus is on the immediate needs now in Gaza, as has been very much described in detail here by the colleagues. But of course, part of our work is to ensure that we start the reflections about the long term and discuss the new developments in Gaza in connection also with the two-state solution in Palestine. And of course, the High Representative is very much engaged in trying to revive the political process. Part of that is, of course, our support to the Palestinian Authority, because we have been also very clear that they are our legitimate partners, and we will continue our support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jacek, and I extend these thanks to all the speakers we had here, distinguished guests, for these insightful views you shared with us in this very important minute. And of course, on behalf of the whole committee, I would like to pass on these thanks, and be aware that we will closely follow the humanitarian situation in Gaza as the DEVE committee. With this, we can move on to item number 12, which is any other business. Is there something that needs to be raised? If not, then item number 13 is that the next meeting is on December 7th from 9 to 10 o'clock. And with this, I close the meeting. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much for
no problem.
No,
don't worry. That's fine.
We can always count on you.
Yeah.
But we don't abuse you.
Have a great